You probably sometimes want the 3 Michelin starred tablecloth, white tablecloth, fully ironed, the whole experience, depending on what you want, at what moment, and with whom you are. And sometimes, if you're in Mendoza in South America and you want an asado, or if you're on the boat in the Galapagos, you want something different. So that's what 580 different members give guests, unique experiences adapted to their local specificities.
Hello, this is Peter Bates in New York. Welcome to TravelDine. My guest today is a UK-born hotelier who ended up managing the famous St. James Boutiques in Bordeaux for 6 years and already had 18 years valuable experience with the organization he was to leave there to join in Paris. Today, he heads up a small, dedicated team based in Paris with responsibility for managing marketing, sales, reservations, communications, and all assets of the brand for some of the finest small luxury hotels and independent restaurants in the world. Anthony Torrington was appointed General Manager of Relaix Chateaux in March 2018 and has responsibility for a network of offices and reservation centers throughout the world, serving members in 67 different countries. I'm delighted to welcome Anthony to TravelDine today. Welcome, Anthony. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks, Peter. Delighted to be with you.
It's nice to see you. So you had a fantastic career as a hotelier. You went to hotel school, everything else, and ended up in Paris. Tell our audience a little bit about your career.
Well, yeah, English born, as you said, and I was in the UK and England. So I was 18, went to boarding school there. Thought I was going to become a doctor like my father, but that changed having worked a few years after A-levels with my mother in a restaurant. Went to hotel school, Lyon in Switzerland. And from there started my career with Accor for a few years, which was a great school after school, as it were, learned a lot. And in 2001, when I was about 28, took over the role of GM in a property that was to become Relaix Chateaux in Mougins in the south of France, the Mascondil. Then Caribbean for a while, another Relaix Chateaux property, Bordeaux you mentioned. And basically, 20 years more or less of running Relaix Chateaux properties as a member. And I guess I'm the Relaix Chateaux man. So when the opportunity came in 2018 to join head office, it was a great move.
Fantastic. And of course, it gives you the benefit of having seen both sides, which is really helpful for everybody, isn't it?
Completely. Understanding our members' needs with our, generally small properties all around the globe, but their day-to-day lives, I understand them fully because I did that for, as I said, 20 years. So that does make a big difference in putting things, taking them from theory into reality, making sure that they're applicable to the day-to-day operations.
That's good. So how many members are there in this unique organization? I mean, you have a category for restaurants and a category for hotels. How does it all work?
We have 580 members in 67 countries at the moment, 80 of which are what we call internally standalone restaurants. So restaurants that don't have accommodation. A lot of people think Relaix Chateaux are only hotels with restaurants, but you can see that 80 is a big number within the 580. And we also have a couple of boats. We've got some boats in the Galapagos, some very small top-end boats in the Amazon as well. So they're pretty specific and one-offs, but 580 members, 67 countries.
Fantastic. And how do they get selected?
Selection process, well, in terms of applications, we get a lot of people coming to knock on the door who spontaneously want to join. We do a small amount of prospection, and not a lot. And obviously you have referrals as well from other members and people we know. A very important point about somebody who wants to join the association is to make sure that they're aligned with our vision. We're very different from most of our colleagues and competitors within the industry in that we are an association. Our shareholders, as it were, are our members. And we look upon things differently in respect that we push business directly towards our members. That is one part of our philosophy. So we make sure when people want to join that they're aligned with our values, that they understand how we do differ from other organizations, so that we don't get people who a few years down the line say to us, well, I didn't understand that it was going to be like that, and that's not what I wanted. So that's a very important initial conversation that we have. Then we have a very rigorous, obviously, inspection process with an independent team of inspectors who inspect candidates. There's more than 500 points that are inspected, both in terms of the technical aspects of any property, but also the emotional side of any experience that you can have within one of our member properties. And then there's once that has been done, the actual process of deciding whether a new member joins or not is solely up to the board of directors, who take the decision, our board of directors, on each application, whether a member joins or not.
And for a restaurant, I can see for a hotel, very easy, you can generate room nights very easily. How do you measure that for when you're looking for a restaurant to join? How
well,
does that differ?
You say for a hotel it's very easy. That's not necessarily the case, because as we push business directly to our members, that's the philosophy behind it.
Right.
Even for the hotels, you can't always measure what you're doing, which is part of the fun, sometimes a challenge. And for restaurants, it's the same thing. We're obviously giving a lot of tools to our restaurant members to help them become, I guess one of the things that we're here to do is to provide services to our members that they cannot do themselves. That's sort of the core essence. So we're obviously promoting our restaurants around the world whenever we are talking to guests, to agents, to whatever, but we're also providing more and more support to our standalone restaurants in terms of HR support, in terms of support on marketing, sales, how they distribute themselves, booking engines for their restaurants if they want them, table management systems, etc. So Relais, people join Relais for a whole lot of different reasons, and it depends what you're looking for. So there's what we always call ROI and ROE, the return on investment, return on emotion, and depending on who you are and what you're looking for, both will be important or not. But for the restaurants, I think joining what is definitely one of the best groups of chefs and restaurants in the world, for a lot of our chefs is very important. And then they get a lot of benefit from all these services and support services that we can give them to make their restaurants, more perform well in certain domains that might be more challenging for them.
And I guess they work together as well, just restaurant to restaurant, to help you guys.
The networking within the association, the exchanges on best practices. We have chefs clubs in all our delegations around the world. We get the chefs together so that they can discuss amongst themselves. Chefs like to speak to chefs, and that is there's a wealth of knowledge throughout the network that we do all that we can to share so that people can benefit from the experience and the best practices of one another.
Fantastic. So is there a magic number? You say you're at 580 now with 80 restaurants. Is there a magic number for the future?
There's not a magic number. There's no wish or desire by the board of directors to grow numbers significantly. What is so important is the quality of the network, and we're working more on stabilizing numbers. I mean, even if we went down slightly, I don't think it would be a problem. We want to have the best of the best. Quality is vital, and there is definitely not a desire to be much more than we currently are.
But it's true, isn't it? There's a lot more investment in small hotels than there ever was before. There's more opportunity for small hoteliers today than ever.
Definitely. I think, COVID has taught us many things. Our properties, I think, are very well aligned with the expectations and needs of guests post-COVID. We've seen that in terms of activity levels over the last few months. And these small properties are investing as well in their product and in their teams, because to keep up to speed, you need to do so. And I think, as I said, with our properties being well aligned, people are realizing that you invest in your product, you invest in your teams, and you get your return on investment. Definitely.
Yeah. So the philosophy is to create a very special global group of like-minded people, attracting like-minded clients. Is that it?
Completely. I mean, it all started off in 1954 with 8 properties from Paris to Nice, down that Route Nationale 7, the road at the time that took people who wanted to go to the Côte d'Azur from Paris. And 8 properties who said to themselves, we've got similar sort of properties, we do similar things, we should come together to do a bit of marketing and communication to attract new guests. That was the Route du Bonheur, the road to happiness that we promote and is still part of our backbone. That's how it all started. And as you said, the philosophy, like-minded people, we want to be able to preserve the diversity of the cuisine around the world. That's so important, and hospitality around the world. When you're in a Relaix Chateau, you need to understand by looking at the dish you're eating, by looking around you where you are in the world, and sharing a passion, which is part of what makes everyone, tick in the morning, of everything that is beautiful in the world. That's what it's all about. And I think more and more it's making the world a more humane world, because that human factor has become so essential to the experience that guests live, that again, that's something that's being invested upon and worked upon more and more.
And you've taken that into your marketing, haven't you, with organizations like the United Nations that you've
completely. Well, that was part of what we did in 2014 when we went to UNESCO, and we said, these are some of our values. And there, I mean, as I mentioned, preserving that diversity, working with local producers, doing good to guests whilst doing good to the local communities, that humane factor. Yes, exactly. I think we were probably looking back, and our Vice President, Olivier Rollinger, with our President Philippe Gombert, were pushing for that in 2014. Well, perhaps some members were looking at that saying, well, okay, I guess I get it, but not quite sure. Whereas now, you look back on that 7 years ago, and you say, wow, they really did have the vision at the time of where we needed to go.
Yeah, fantastic. So I guess, like everybody else, your members have been relying on domestic business quite a lot over the last 18 months. And has that worked well? Can you give us any case studies?
Yeah, I mean, we hit COVID, and as everyone knows, March of last year, we went up to 95% of our network was closed exceptionally at the beginning of the crisis of the pandemic. That came down last summer 2020 to around about, it came down sort of to 45%, 15%. It plateaued out, went back up, as we know, in October of last year, and there stayed at around 45% throughout winter in the Northern Hemisphere. And it's come down now gradually. We're only at 2% of the network today that's exceptionally closed. So virtually all of our members have reopened. You're right. Domestic was relatively strong in 2020 during the summer season, Northern Hemisphere. Domestic was very strong this year in the Northern Hemisphere. Southern Hemisphere have had a challenging time because they came out of their high season just when COVID hit in. They didn't have a season 2020, 2021. They're hoping to have one in the winter to come. Southern Hemisphere, and we add into that India. India, in many respects, have a business pattern and trends that follow the Southern Hemisphere. So what we have seen is where domestic has been able to happen, business over the last few months has been globally very good. A bit more challenging for big cities. Last year, it was more challenging for islands. But small properties, we're generally in the countryside, seaside, mountainside, farm to table, a high level of hygiene, a high level of service. And we've also seen, in terms of domestic, that some countries where domestic was at a lower level pre-COVID, for example, Italy, Spain, who probably thought they wouldn't be able to get to decent levels of occupancy without overseas, have seen a lot of domestic, new domestic. Those people who are not traveling far away and are staying in their countries, and who are generally, spending money within properties in their country. So that's brought a new clientele. Domestic has definitely been a great benefit for those countries who've got strong domestic.
And now, of course, the catch is to keep that business, right? I mean,
well, that's it. It's an opportunity, because those guests who you didn't see previously, who always flew abroad, you've got to try and keep them. But it's a new clientele that, if you do your job well, you can keep them for the future. Yeah,
absolutely. So, sitting in Paris, how have you been able to communicate and keep in touch with your members over all this time?
I think that's on the 12th. I think it was the 12th of March when I left the office. I said to one of the people in the office, "We must get a Zoom account set up, because I think we're going to have bad news in the next few days." And that person said to me, "You sure we need a Zoom account?" We've run 450 delegation calls since the start of the crisis, 450 with our members worldwide. 110 international member calls, where we bring our members together initially once every week, and then once every 2 weeks throughout the crisis, to share best practices, to help them get through it. We've done a lot of sales webinars. We've done a lot of webinars with our voice team, so that members can keep in contact with our voice sales teams as well. So there's been nearly 1,000, I think, calls organized globally, which sounds huge, but that's helped people. We saw it. It hit them like it hit us all. Mm-hmm. Am I going to get through this? Am I ever going to reopen? Am I going to be able to reopen? So the wonderful thing about having a network internationally throughout the globe is that We had Chinese members very soon on the calls in March, April of last year saying, well, we've reopened. This is what we're doing. This is what we're doing with masks. This is what we're doing with things in the restaurant, etc. Which gives you hope.
Yes.
And then there was a lot of exchanges on best practices about people setting up takeaway food, how you're doing it. And that just continued. We then did a big work with Veritas to have guidelines in terms of all sanitary measures, etc. So I think the family spirit has never been as strong within Relaix, and we've never seen so much of our members, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
And bringing all of that knowledge together and sharing it with one another just underlines the family spirit within the association.
No, that's really great. That's fantastic. One thing that struck me, and it really goes back, I guess, to COVID as well, was I had no idea there were so many villas and vacation rentals within the organization. It never dawned on me, I don't think. But it seems to be an important part of your business.
It is. Arno Vilgus, who's in charge of all our sales, marketing, digital things, he was pushing for that straight away. We've got a lot of villas within Relaix. We always have had. But we never really put them aside on a platform or digitalize them differently in terms of sales. So we did that with great success. We've got more than 600 villas in our villa program. Very much aligned with guest needs. We see there's huge demand for these villas. So what's important to understand is that they're always linked to a property. So we don't take standalone villas who don't have service and everything that goes with it in terms of hotel. But this is for guests who want to be in a Relaix Chateau. They want to be able to walk to the gastronomic or the restaurant if they want to. They want to be able to go to the spa if they want to, but they also want to be able to stay in the villa if they want to, dine in the villa if they want to, and have all the services there as well. So we've seen huge success over the summer season this year with those villas, and more members are looking at integrating villas they perhaps had thought about doing or that they hadn't got in with us. Definitely there's a trend towards that.
No, that's fantastic. And does that reflect multi-generational travel?
Definitely does, because you can go there, you can go there with your families, with your children, with your grandchildren, they're all in there. If you want to be on your own, but with all the benefits of being in a Relaix Chateau, they're ideally positioned.
That's a winner. That's a great point to come out of COVID, isn't it? That's something that's
completely. Yeah, I mean, I know it's been a terrible pandemic for so many reasons. We all know that, but there have been silver linings. And one of the things, as you said, this villa program, I think people are looking upon how they travel sometimes differently. They want to get back to these family reunions that they haven't been having. They want to see one another. They don't want to be bothered necessarily by other guests. They want to be amongst themselves. So the villa program is great for that. Yeah. Fantastic.
So then guests, you have all these guests around the world. They love your organization. They haven't been able to travel necessarily. So how are you communicating with them over the last 6 months?
Well, I guess initially there was a few weeks of very limited communication because we felt when the pandemic hit in, it was just not the right thing to be doing, to be communicating a lot about what we are and those lovely moments in hotels. Then we were building up desire very quickly. I mean, I think a lot of people were needing and wanting to be traveling virtually and seeing things. So there was a lot of, write up your bucket list. Where would you like to go? Keep that desire there. Let's put some light at the end of the tunnel. Let's give everyone a goal in terms of, a holiday, a family holiday, a couple holiday, whatever. So we did a lot of communication in the first few months after that quiet period, building up desire. A lot of our members opened up, as I said, in the summer of 2020. So there we were back to something a bit more normal. We kept a lot of the time communicating with the people who help our members attract new guests, agents, or be whatever it is. So there was always that work going on as well. And then coming out of the second winter, where, sort of spring of this year, we went into a real revival phase where we got some of our members to speak about what they were doing, inspiring guests once again to come back and travel. So it's always a question of balancing overkill in terms of communication, also keeping that link. There was a lot of our members who were communicating well in terms of recipes, in terms of wine tasting online, fabulous initiatives throughout the globe that we saw of how both ourselves as a brand, but also all our members who are independent, kept the link with their guests and their communities.
And all this was online, or did you use Zoom as well for that?
everything virtually was online. That's how we've been communicating in terms of physical events. We're getting back to physical events now. The US was a bit earlier than most. We had a few physical events in May, June of this year in the US. But yeah, virtually everyone was communicating online, which again has its benefits. If you want to be communicating on certain things, if you want to be promoting your properties, if you want to be discussing with our teams in terms of sales, etc., the online possibilities give a lot of benefits as well.
That's fantastic. So I read somewhere you've got something like 22,000 dedicated staff working for individual, independent, passionate owners in 67 countries and over 13,000 rooms and suites around the world. How do you convey a brand message to everyone and build momentum for what you're doing?
It's 42,000 staff. Pre-COVID, we had 42,000 staff members in our 580 properties worldwide. Wow. We bring together independent hoteliers, chefs. So you have to try and communicate with those 42,000, which is a great challenge. It's lovely to try and tackle that. What we've launched, we've done a lot of new projects during COVID. We haven't been dormant, not at all. We've launched a new intranet called My Relaix, which enables us to speak to all of our members on an app, on their phones or on desktop. And we now have, with this new tool, the possibility of communicating with every staff member that they have around the world, which is fabulous. Because the messages that you put across to a GM or a general manager or an owner are not the same as what we want to put across to staff. Right. So we now have the possibility of doing inductions with those team members in different languages around the globe, getting the message across, because we want, ideally, those 42,000 staff members to be ambassadors of our brand, knowing what Relaix stands for, knowing what the history of Relaix is, what we've been doing and why we're doing it. So we're now doing that more and more through these inductions, the online tools that I talked about. And HR, which is a major challenge for all of our members in most areas of the world at the moment, as everyone knows, has become one of our key topics. We're working on a new recruitment website. Which will be launched in a couple of months' time. A new system, what's called an ATS, an applicant tracking system, so that our members can recruit. We have a current system, but we're moving forward to something much more modern. And then we're also working now on the employer brand, which is a very interesting topic, because we want to have an employer brand as a global association. But we're bringing together independent members who have sometimes, and they should have their own employer brand. So it's getting across the key messages of what a staff member or a candidate, when they want to come and join the family, what can we give them in terms of experiences? What can we give them in terms of a career? We want to be able, when you go to and see these hotel schools or schools in general, wherever people are learning, or somebody who asks you, what career opportunities can Relaix give me? That whilst federating 580 independents, we can also say to them, you can have a career within Relaix. We've got some of the industry's best experts in so many domains who love transmitting their passion, their knowledge to staff, and then you can move around the network, which is fabulous as well.
Oh, that's great. So you do have a referral program for staff?
We have a recruitment tool. We have the possibility within that tool that's going to be launched to do referrals, to say this is somebody who knows Relaix, who's been working in a Relaix property and who is endorsed by the property with whom they were working.
Fantastic. I've also read that partnerships are important to you as an organization. Champagne has, you have a partnership with Ponant, the luxury French cruise line, the Explorer ships. How do those partnerships work and how do you select them?
Well, again, yeah, you're right. We have a certain number of partners. Ponant is one of them. We have champagne houses. Historically, they're the partners of Relaix. Most important thing is to make sure that we are aligned with values, the way we're doing things. So all of our partners have those same values in terms of the way they do things, the way they look after their teams, the way they look after their guests. Ponant is a good example, which, as you said, a very, very top-end cruise company, wonderful boats, ships. Ecologically orientated. They have a very clear statement on how they look upon all of that aspect of their brand. So we're sharing values, giving visibility to one another in the partnerships. These brands want to be promoted amongst our network and with our guests. So there's both a B2B and a B2C aspect on it. And Yeah, I mean, if we take the champagne houses with whom we've worked for many, many years, some of them since more or less the start of the association, sharing values, working together on projects, and they're part of the family. And they are both used and helped by our members in both ways. They help the members help them. Very much a win-win situation.
Now, are these partnerships mainly global or regional?
The vast majority are international global partnerships. We do have some local partnerships. When there's no conflict of interest in between a local partnership and a global partnership, which is obviously not what we want, and that we want members in a delegation to have help on specific things, and we have a partner who's interested, we can have delegation partnerships as opposed to global international partnerships.
Okay. You use the word delegation quite a lot. By delegation,
yes.
a region, is it?
Yeah, I should have explained that. We have 580 members. Every member links into a delegation. We have 21 delegations in the world. A delegation can be a country, a continent, a group of countries, or in the case of France, where we have 150 members, it's 5 delegations. So North America, we have an East Coast delegation, in the States, a West Coast, and Canada. South America is a delegation. So all of our members are linked into a delegation where there's a delegation director, who is somebody who works for Relaix, and who is the key point of contact for any member so that they can fully benefit from everything we want to provide in terms of services. They can optimize their affiliation with us. So they have that possibility. And that enables us to bring members together who have similar needs, expectations. So we're not, some things are global and some things are adapted locally.
So each of those delegations has a full-time employee?
Each of those delegations has a full-time employee.
That's fantastic.
So yeah, I mean, it's what we call member support, the team of member services. Those directors of delegations are there to look after, work with the delegations. And because we're an association, every delegation has one member elected by the other members of the delegation that represents them at the board of directors.
Right.
So we're always listening to the members. We are here to serve our members.
Fantastic. So talking about delegations, you have amazing properties in India and quite a lot of them, I think about 10, and then a further 27 in Africa and the Indian Ocean, I think. Can you give us a quick tour of that?
Yeah, we've got some wonderful, as you're right, in India, some wonderful properties. I could pick any of them, and I don't like sort of picking because you sort of leave the others out. But we've got 3 Sujan properties that are tents, but tents Relaix Chateaux style in Rajasthan, amazingly well designed, put together. You're in the, I mean, very much attention to detail. So you're in the middle of these wonderful areas. Sometimes you're looking for animals, and you've got that sense of adapting the product to where you are. And you know, people often say, well, Relaix Chateaux, it's chateaux, isn't it? It's these historical buildings. Well, a lot of our properties are historical buildings, of course, but we've got these tents, and they're perfectly adapted to the needs. So you've got your cuisine. Cuisine is always the backbone of any of our properties. I think it's one of our real differentiating points compared to some of our colleagues. So the way you look after the local produce, your farm to table, sourcing it locally, keeping your local producers alive in some respects by working with them, working with your communities. So those 3 properties, you've got the Siraj, you've got Jawai, which is sensational, and Sherbag in Rajasthan. You can then travel across to Sri Lanka, where we've got Resplendent Ceylon, the Fernando family, well, we've got 3 properties there, a wonderful family who are tea makers in Sri Lanka and have set up these 3 very different properties, some on the coast, some inland. Again, it's, of course, you know, we sometimes use the word luxury, which is used in all sorts of forms and shapes to say different things. There's real authenticity and simplicity sometimes in a very elegant manner. The way you're looked after. And what you see in all of these properties, and I'll talk about one in South Africa as well in a moment, is the way you're looked after by the teams. What makes things so special is the human factor. And here you've got owners of these properties that understand the necessity to have stable teams, to be looking after their local communities, working with them, and making just all the service aspects so aligned with both the local traditional way of doing things and the needs and expectations of guests who are traveling internationally. And the other one I wanted to mention is on the banks of the San River in the Sabi-San Game Reserve in South Africa. It's part of the more global greater Kruger National Park, where you've got Londolozi. Londolozi is one of my amazing experiences that I'm lucky enough to live and traveling the world to see the members and look after these delegation meetings. I had a barbecue at Londolozi at the end of the day, you know, when you're out doing a safari and you come back. Magical moments, looking at the stars, eating wonderful produce, cooked in a simple manner, but wonderfully cooked, with an amazing group of people. It's just magic. And that's Relais as well. You probably sometimes want the 3 Michelin starred tablecloth, white tablecloth, fully ironed, the whole experience, depending on what you want, at what moment, and with whom you are. And sometimes, if you're in Mendoza in South America and you want an asado, or if you're on the boat in the Galapagos, you want something different. So that's what 580 different members give guests. Unique experiences adapted to their local specificities.
And that's so important today. Experiences is something that everybody
experiential
after. So marketing in India, there's an interesting one. It's not always easy, but we know there are a great number of very wealthy clients in India traveling the world. How do you talk to the affluent Indian traveler?
Well, I think, again, we've changed a lot the way we communicate since the beginning of the pandemic, because we've had to be a lot more local. We used to be communicating very globally. India typically is a destination where you had a lot of inbound, a very limited domestic. Borders shut down, pandemic hits in. How do we attract the domestic market? So we've got a PR office, which is now in place in India. So we are communicating, in terms of PR within the country. We've got a social media agency there who's running social media campaigns to get the brand awareness out. We've got some of the best in India in terms of properties. So it's pushing brand awareness through our members,
right?
Making the members shine and enabling them to shine, being associated with the brand, so that when you visit a property in India that's Relais, you know it's Relais, you know about the brand, you know that we're in 67 countries with 580 members. So we've worked a lot on that. There have been, pre-COVID, there were charity events in India, which has given a lot of brand awareness as well, fundraising. And we're promoting locally. We have local Facebook pages in each delegation, which promote us to the local market. So there's a mixture of things, but I think having adapted necessarily, due to the fact that international travel came to a halt, is again one of the silver linings, because we're going to be able to continue those actions in local markets to raise brand awareness, to get the message out there and to attract the domestic, whilst benefiting from international overseas travel once that comes back.
And when a traveler in a country like India is ready to travel, do they go to a travel advisor, or do you find they go direct?
If they're traveling domestically, they do go sometimes through a travel advisor, which I think is an important thing if they want to feel reassured. I think we're in a market where people do need to be reassured, so it can be through our channels or through a travel advisor channel. And some go direct, they don't need to. I mean, obviously there's been a big difference in depending on which markets, in terms of going through travel advisors or not. And again, coming back to the philosophy of our brand, which is pushing business directly towards our members, that's what we try and encourage them to do. But there's a place for both.
That's good. Okay. So looking ahead, we're into 22 almost immediately now. What are you forecasting the luxury travel market and hospitality business? What are you seeing next year look like?
Trends. I think, well, first of all, subject to what's going to happen with COVID in the next few months, and let's hope that things don't get worse and stay positive. I think travel in our types of properties is going to be very good. I think there's been a real build-up of demand. People are wanting to travel. People are going to be thinking a lot more about why they travel, where they travel, how often they travel. So, I mean, we use the famous term slow travel. I think we're definitely looking at that, giving more sense to the way one does things. You know, I think we probably got into a position where we were sometimes just traveling so easily that we didn't think about it much. You jump on a plane, you go elsewhere. So I think slow travel, looking at how you take the decisions about where you want to go. I think people are going to always wanting to learn more and more when they're traveling. Understanding, be it your producers who are giving you your produce for the restaurant, or learning about wine with the sommelier, or visiting vineyards, learning about the culture. A Relaix Chateaux should be like a lighthouse that shines and lights up everything around it in its area region, and should be sort of the opening entrance to that region. And we see with the guests that more and more they're wanting to understand, they're wanting to learn. I think that will be an essential part of things as well. And definitely on the food angle, the cuisine angle, it will be eating things that do you good yourself, whilst also doing good to those who produce it, and making sure that people are, we're helping those producers and those local suppliers. So I think that will be part of it. We've talked about the villa program. I think that's definitely a trend to more exclusive in terms of confidentiality. People want to be amongst themselves. And I think, and that's really what we try and push across as a message to our members in India and in the Southern Hemisphere. It's been terribly complicated in New Zealand and Australia, Africa, South America. Hang on in there, because we've seen what's happened this summer in the Northern Hemisphere, other than in India. We've seen that the demand is very high. Hang on in there. People have put you on their bucket list. They're going to want to come and see you and travel to those wonderful destinations that they haven't been able to get to.
Fantastic. So finally, things have changed, as we keep saying during this conversation, and the global clientele has changed too. You've taken a very electronic route. You used to have this wonderful big guidebook in the back of everybody's car, particularly in France, I remember. But your marketing has changed. You've evolved. Where do you see that going?
Well, the guidebook, you're right. The guidebook was a very simple decision to take, because at the start of the crisis, everyone knew that putting guidebooks in hotel bedrooms was not what was recommended in terms of hygiene. So we stopped the guidebook. We'd already pushed digitally for many years. It wasn't new. It's been for us a big digital shift over the last 10 years. And we have a very good, well-performing website, a commercial website. We have obviously the apps that are available on phones that we've been pushing, updating, making more and more performing. So that's something that we were already doing, and necessarily when the guidebook stopped, we did that even more. I think the guidebook, we will get back to print at some point, because guests want print. Will it be as in the past? To be seen. But we definitely are working on a project to get back to print. But the way it's a digital world, moving towards, that we're much more active than we used to be on social media. We've got a very active Instagram account, Facebook, LinkedIn as well is becoming more active. So we're giving resources to those needs that we have, and actively pushing what we need to be doing on our different digital tools to make them user-friendly, to make them efficient, and to make sure that we're not losing any guests when they go on them. So it's just a continuity. It's not something that's changed with COVID. It's something that's been accelerated necessarily with COVID. But it was definitely, we were already working on it for many years before COVID.
Fantastic. Gosh, so COVID actually has proved quite successful for you in some ways, because you've developed your villa product, you've got your domestic tourism going greater, you've brought your community together more strongly. So there have been some positives out of a very, very difficult situation.
Yeah, it's been a horrendously difficult time for a lot of people. Most of our members have enormously suffered. There's been, loss of life in some properties, and it's terrible, terrible. And as India and Southern Hemisphere, it's been a very, very long tunnel, and they're still in it. So not forgetting that, there have been some silver linings. I think one of the greatest is the way we've really brought the community together. We were already a wonderful family, but we've seen so much of our members. We used to see them physically, perhaps twice or three times a year. Right. International Congress, delegation meeting, where we saw them every week or every 2 weeks for most of them. So that was great. And we've had time, whilst things have changed, to work on these projects that we've talked about, taking things forward. That was always, whilst we had obviously to take decisions in terms of what we can do and what resources we can give during the crisis, we were very active because we felt we've got to use this time to prepare the after COVID. Because our members want efficiency. They want us to be performing, to be giving them services. And whilst we had to accompany them, and we did, in terms of fees and the way they could pay their fees during this period, which was very important, we also want to be working on projects. And we've now put a bit more investment back in again, which is vital. The primary goal, we sat down at the beginning of the crisis with the board of directors and our president, was we must make sure that we don't lose any members of the family during the crisis. And the figures show that we had less leaving members in the crisis year than in an average year pre-COVID. And that's just a wonderful satisfaction for the whole team and the whole family of Relaix, because it's in difficult times that you need to rely on one another. It's in difficult times that you need to be accompanied and be helped. And I think that was our mission, and we're still on it, and we'll continue to be on it, as always, because we're a family.
Anthony, I've really enjoyed talking to you. I've learned an awful lot. Thank you so much indeed for joining us on TravelDine today, and let's stay in touch.
Peter, been lovely having this chat. Really, really lovely. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed sharing those things with you, and keep in touch. Stay safe, as we say.